like you to welcome Julie Stiglitz and Pamela Fox to talk about achievement and progress. Thank you.
Did he give us the clicker back?
You got this guy, yeah? Yeah. Okay, great. Hello, my name is Julia Stiglitz, and I'm joined here with my colleague, Pamela Fox. I do business development and partnerships at Coursera, and Pamela is a product engineer. But I actually started as a 4th grade teacher, and this is a picture of my classroom when they won the epic 10,000-page reading challenge. And it had come down to the wire. It was a week before winter break, and that was the deadline for reaching the challenge. And we were at about 9,000 pages. And the students stayed in during recess, they stayed in during lunch, they went to each other's houses after school to read, and they met it. And I think for me, this picture captures the essence of what we're trying to achieve when it comes to gamification in education, or what we're trying to achieve when we think about progress and achievement in education. My students it was in East San Jose, they were almost all below grade level, and they experienced progress. They saw their progress along the way as we went through the challenge. And they experienced achievement. This student right up in the front was one of my lowest readers, and he contributed to the challenge probably more than anyone else. And ultimately what they experienced were the intrinsic rewards of reading. And that is something that stayed with them long after the challenge was actually done. So as we think about it at Coursera, this is ultimately what we're trying to do. So Coursera, a little bit of background. We actually launched exactly a year ago today. So today is our 1-year anniversary. We launched with 4 partner universities, University of Pennsylvania, Princeton, Stanford, and University of Michigan. Since then, we've grown. We have 62 partner universities, including 24 international universities, which we're really proud about. We have over 300 courses and have grown to over 3 million students. Our students come from all over the world. About 2/3 of them are international, and actually about 40% of them are from the developing world. And there's a real range of courses, and you can see some of them up here. The history of rock. There is machine learning. There's a course that's going on right now on introduction to songwriting. And so really a whole range of courses. And these courses are massive. So the average size is between 30 and 60,000 people. And our largest class has 180,000 people. And that's a philosophy class out of Duke. But what we saw very early on was that only about 5% of the enrolled students were successfully completing the course. Now this is not, we don't think that this is actually the way to evaluate the success of these courses, and I'll get into that later. Another way to look at it is, if you look at the number of students that complete the first assignment to the number of students who complete the final assignment, it's about 45%. So that's another way to look at it. Again, this paradigm I don't think is the right paradigm to evaluate MOOCs, but it does point to the fact that there are some real challenges that students face when they're online. And these challenges aren't unique to online, but I think they're exacerbated by it. And I think online also presents some really unique opportunities to try to solve them. So what Pamela and I are going to do right now is go through each of these motivational challenges and talk about how we're thinking of addressing them, or what we're seeing in terms of our students' behavior. So let's look at the first one. What's in it for me? Okay? So a traditional college class, you know that you're going to take the class, you're going to then go on to get your degree, and your hope is that you'll then go on and get a better job. So you know what's in it for you. Our classes, there's no official credit. You don't get credit. They're completely free, so some students wonder what's in it for them. And the first thing I want to point out is that actually students have really different motivations when they're taking our classes. There's students, 60% of students are just interested. They're doing it for enjoyment or entertainment. And then about 50% say that they're interested in it for something that's job related. So they're interested in improving their careers, getting skills for their careers. And we actually see the differences in terms of how students are motivated to take these courses in terms of how they engage in the courses. So what this is, it's a density map which shows how students are engaging with our platform. And the red colors show more students, and the blue is less students. So if we look up at the top A quadrant, you can see that and this is, right here is lectures, and this is assessments. So you see at the very top, there's red at the very top with students that have watched all the lectures but haven't done any of the assignments. And then if we look down over here, this is forum activity and this is assessments. And if we look here, we see that there's actually a large number of students that are engaging in the forums but aren't doing the assignments. So how students are choosing to engage in an online course is very different. You know, some students are done with doing assignments. They don't want to do assignments anymore. They're done with homework. And that's okay. They want to engage in the social aspects of it. They want to engage in the forums. And then other students, they just want to watch all the videos. They're not interested in the assignments either. So there's all different ways that students are engaging in the platform. And I think a much bigger challenge for us than retention is actually understanding the intention of our students and figuring out how we can let each of these students that want to have different pathways through our courses experience progress and achievement. And that's something that we haven't figured out yet. But there are 50% of our students that are interested in using this for their job. And so one of the issues that we're trying to tackle is how do we make our certificate of completion meaningful? And one way to do that is to make sure that the people who say they're taking the class actually are the people who are taking the class. So we launched something called Signature Track, where we verify students' identity, and they pay a small fee, and then we make sure that they are who they say they are when they get their statement of accomplishment or certificate of completion, which is co-branded with the university and us. And this has had really interesting impacts on retention. So if we look here, this is the completion rate. These are non-signature track students, and these are signature track students. And we see that only about 7%, this is one of our classes, a nutrition class, about 7% of students, of registered students completed the class, but about 74% of signature track students completed it. Well, you could say, you know, these students self-selected into that. These are the highly motivated students who wanted to be part of signature track. So it's not really signature track, it's rather that they were really motivated. So we surveyed those students. We surveyed them about a month into the course. And what we found was that of the surveyed students, they said how committed they were to actually completing the class. Of the highly committed group, about 84% of the non-signature track students completed, and about 95% of the signature track completed. So there's something to this credential that is causing students that leads to higher rates of retention. What we don't know is whether it's that they really believe that this is going to help them get a better job, whether they really want this validation, whether it's the sunk cost fallacy where they've put in that cost and now they want to make sure that they're getting their money's worth. So we don't know exactly why, but what is clear is it has a clear impact on retention. Okay, moving along, another challenge, but it's hard. So I'm going to start with this problem. So let's say I give you all this problem. Some of you might recognize it. Say I give it to you and I say, I'm going to give you $200 to whoever solves this problem. We don't have time to do this, but what I would observe in the room would be that the majority of you would start furiously working on it. Okay. And then after about 30 seconds, about a minute, most of you would stop. Some of you, maybe in the front row over here, you've had a lot of experience in school, you're a resilient student, you really believe in yourself as a learner, you would keep going, but most of you would stop. And the reason is because you don't believe that you can actually solve it. It's too hard. And students aren't stupid. If they don't believe that they can solve it, why would they try? You stop. And so when we're thinking about how to solve the problem, it's too hard. I think it's a matter of breaking things down into tangible objectives and then also showing students along the way that they're actually able to achieve those objectives. And we ran an interesting experiment that got at this. So this was an experiment that we ran with our newsletter. And it was a multivariate experiment. We had 4 different parts to the experiment, to the newsletter. There was a part that showed what students did that week, like they logged in, which is good. There's a part that showed deadlines for the class. There's a part that showed upcoming videos, and then a part that showed their progress. And the results were interesting. So this is looking at the change in lecture retention. And what we see is that if we just have the deadlines, when we had the email that just had the deadlines, which was one of the scenarios, it actually decreased retention. It had a negative impact on retention. And then the thing that had the biggest improvement on retention was progress bar, the progress bar. But even bigger than that was the progress bar with the deadlines and with the activity. So my thinking in terms of why is that if you just show students the deadlines and you don't show them that they've achieved anything, it can be overwhelming. There's just a lot that they have to do and you're not showing them that they've already experienced success. Whereas if you're showing them progress, you're showing them that they have achieved, and then you're showing them, look, there's this tangible next step for you to keep achieving, it's much more motivating. So this is something we still need to dig into, but I think it was an interesting first experiment. Another thing that we're doing to try to make it less hard is allowing students to take a quiz as many times as they want. So here's an example. You can do up to 20 attempts to take a quiz, which makes it it's less daunting to go into it. And the results of this are also interesting. So this is the first submission, the results, the range in terms of scores on the first submission, and then this is the range in the last submission, and you see that it improved. Well, this actually is not that interesting, because if we put a monkey on a computer and they banged enough times, ultimately they would get it right, and we would see a similar trend. But what's really interesting is what happened on the next quiz. So on the next quiz, students who improved on average 3 points from the first submission to the last submission improved a full point on the next quiz. So they're actually improving this sort of learning of trying over and over again and finally mastering it leads to actual improvement of learning. And I think that what's exciting there is it's not just the perception of things getting less hard, but actually things are getting less hard for the student. The next time they take it, it is less hard. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Pamela, who's going to go and talk about the next motivation.
All right, so one of the other challenges as a student and as somebody in a conference is that you can get bored, right? And in a traditional classroom setting, you're sitting in the classroom and maybe you're bored, but you kind of have to be there, right? And you at least feel some sort of pressure to stay there because that's a little awkward. You walk out in the middle of your professor and they're like, hey, dude, where are you going? Come back. But here, you know, when you're watching something in a browser, you've got like 20 other tabs open and there's crazy shit happening on Reddit and you're like, oh, wow, it's really, really easy for me just to go over to the other tab, right? So it's so easy for students to walk with their fingers that, that boredom becomes even more of an issue online, right? So I actually decided to do a little research on what boredom actually is. And a lot of us might think of boredom as like being like this very low energy thing and being kind of like sad or depressed. But it turns out that boredom is actually a high arousal state and it's associated with like higher heart rate, higher cortisol levels. But the big thing is that it's decreased attention. And there's this entire research paper that actually goes through they figured out the exact steps to induce boredom in people. So if you want to make people bored, you just have to follow these steps, right? So what do? You create monotony by using this highly predictive repetitive stimuli. You prevent drowsiness by having it actually be high frequencies. You do not satisfy any need for excitement. Don't do any surprises, anything new. Everything should be the same. Don't tell them how long it's going to be. Don't explain why it's going to take that long. And emphasize the passage of time. So when we think about that, and we think about classrooms, it's like, what are those, right? Lectures, right? Especially like lectures on videos with the little progress bars below, right? They seem like a really, really good way to induce boredom. And they figured out actually the time that it takes to induce boredom is right around like 8 or 10 minutes, right? So the first thing we look at is lectures, okay? Because we've seen that 10 minutes is kind of the point at which all lectures will become boring, even if you're really exciting, which means that actually, well, luckily we've switched people, so we've done it perfectly. Nice. We didn't even think about that. So what we actually do is one of the things, these are Kevin's lectures, we try and get the professors to actually split their lectures up into smaller chunks, right? So he's got everything from like 2 minutes to 14 minutes, right? So the students can actually look at the lecture. They know how long it's going to be. We document the duration. They click on it. They're like, all right, I just have engaged for this long. And they can even speed it up. And a lot of people speed up. You can speed up to 2 times. And people do that because I accidentally broke the 2 times functionality the other day. And everybody on Twitter is like, I can't speed up my professors 2 times. It's like, oh my God, they sound like chipmunks. But some people really like chipmunks. So, the lectures are smaller, you can get through them, and that seems to work really well, and people really, really like that. So that's one thing you can do. The other thing you can do is like, all right, you've made the lecture small, but even so, right, 10 minutes of something boring can still be boring. So a lot of professors figure out how can they actually reduce the monotony of their lectures, right? So some professors don't even really do lectures at all. So there's this modern poetry class, which is really, really popular with students. And this guy, Al, he didn't really do lectures. He did these discussions that people could, he was chatting with his TAs in this writer house. You could call in and tweet in. He would answer questions. He'd have poems read out loud. And there was like this Socratic style discussions. And people really liked it. They felt really engaged. It felt really intimate. And it wasn't a lecture anymore, right? And that contributed to part of why his class was so popular. Another example, we have Kevin somewhere here. And he talked earlier today. He actually did like, experimented with like some little gamification in his lectures where I got a bunch of screens here and he played around with this stuff in the background and he challenged his students to actually pay attention to that, kind of like you did in the highlights magazines when you were a kid, and discuss it in the forums, and it was like this little mini challenge. So something to make you pay a little more attention. Because remember that boredom is high arousal but low attention, right? So that's cool. So we have many professors that are trying to figure out how they can liven up their lectures, and this is only 2 examples out of like this whole gallery. But what else do we have in a class, right? That's the thing, you don't want a class to all be lectures, and that's one of the things we pride on is the fact that we're not just a bunch of lectures, we're an entire class experience. And one of the things we have that's actually really cool is these assessments that are peer graded. Because we have all these quizzes and they're like automatically graded and like they test like kind of basic multiple choice stuff, but that's kind of it. But when you can have peer graded assessments, it means that we can actually have people do creative things and come up with new things. And peers, as long as we have up to five peers grade you, we can actually come up with a decent score. So professors can use this to come up with these like assignments where students can actually like exercise creativity and it's not just same old, same old. So this design class had these weekly design challenges where they'd come up with designs, they would sketch it out, they'd come up with a proposal, and their peers would comment on it. So this one was awesome. It was like a way to avoid their dog unrolling the toilet paper. There was the nap cap, which is something I'm sure, for conferences or whatever you guys, we could all use. And students really, really enjoyed it, right? It was a way for them to actually understand the lessons beyond just these kind of standard quizzes. Another class that had fun with these peer assessments is songwriting. It's actually going on right now, so I just checked Twitter yesterday to find all these tweets about it. They actually write songs for the thing, right? And so you can see somebody like getting excited about it. He had a picture with his laptop and a big thing of M&Ms, like getting ready to write a song. So he's getting excited about the actual assignment because he doesn't know what's going to come out, but it's going to be this process. And then people are tweeting out what they wrote, and then they're going through the process of the peer grading, and they're like, oh wow, this is cool, I just got comments. So it becomes more than just this thing that's over. It becomes this whole thing where you never know like what your peers are going to say. It's much more of a a collaborative process there. So that's really cool too. So those are some of the ways that we have, we've been experimenting with reducing boredom, and we really encourage the professors to experiment here because it's really up to them, like what they're going to do with their lectures, and we've seen like tons of different approaches, and all of them can work in different ways, and also with the peer assessments, right? And we don't have hard stats on any of them, but we're encouraging people to try things out, and we'll see what works, what doesn't. Not everything does. We'll see. All right, so we also have the problem that you can get lonely, right? So think about a traditional classroom setting, right? So this is me like teaching on the weekends, and you walk in and you're surrounded by people. So people are there, you're socially accountable, people expect you to show up, the professor can like look you right in the eyes, and you're surrounded by people, so you have this social presence. You also have community, right? Like you're all kind of in it together, you all come in there, you want to learn. And then you can have like this great group work where you can actually, learn from each other, and work with 2 people or 6 people or something like that, right? So there's all these benefits, these social benefits when you're learning in the classroom, when you're directly around people, just both the knowledge that they're there and the ability to learn from them and learn together, which can really deepen your knowledge. And so we can get all this for free in the classroom, kind of, if you do some group stuff. But then when we get to online's a lot harder, right? So we've got thousands of strangers, they're all across the world, and when you get to the classroom, you can't even see any of them anyway, right? So even if you were able to make friends with them, where are they, what are they doing? It's just a bunch of text, right? So here, one of the things we do is we actually run our sessions on a schedule, so you can see when things start, you have the deadlines, all that stuff. We've got these forums, and people can have these discussions, and they can have discussions across time zones, so they can actually have more discussions that they could have in real life, and people love that. We're experimenting with badgeable. So we've seen that the forums actually correlate with retention. So we're putting more effort into it. We're going to do a little badging experiment next week to actually see how badging can affect our forum participation. And we're working with some Stanford researchers to figure out the optimal numbers of badges and at what point you get the badges and how that leads you towards better participation. We're experimenting with face-to-face because that's even another component of social that cements the things. And so we've been playing out with Google Hangouts. And then there's also even meetups, like true face-to-face, right? And we've had some really successful things there. And some of the things we try don't work, right? So some people say, like, all right, if we just connect people to their Facebook friends, it'll be awesome. They'll suddenly be connected and they'll want to do more. So HCI tried that out, and they did this experiment where you like commit to your Facebook friends that you're going to do it, and you get emails showing them who did it. And it turns out it didn't always work to just connect people to their Facebook friends. The only time it worked is if you actually had the commitment and the proof. If you only had the proof, you actually ended up doing worse. So one of the things we've learned with a lot of stuff we've done is that just because you might think it's just going to work, it's always going to make things better, sometimes things make it worse, right? If you only show the deadlines but don't show the progress bar, it makes it worse. If you only show the commitment but don't show this, it's going to make it worse. So that's why we have to experiment and actually like get this data. Because it's not, we can't always trust our intuitions here. People are really weird things, right? So, Julia.
I know that
Or are we over?
we are.
So yeah, so basically, we just want to keep learning from our learners, trying some out, trying to get real data so that next time we can share some more stuff that we've learned with you all. Thanks.
Okay, loads of content. By all means, grab them at the break and go through all that amazing material.